just change the screen thing since we're not using the screen. We'll get the camera on. All right, Amy. Go ahead.
So my case study today was about baptism and baptism in India specifically, and how it can kind of cause some issues. So Rukmini is a high caste former Hindu who converted to Christianity because of the influence of her Christian friends she met in college. And I think we all know what high caste means, right? Mm-hmm. So she stayed a secret believer for some time for multiple reasons. She would be completely ostracized from her family and caste. She would be unlikely to marry, and she may bring harm to the Christians around her because it was illegal to convert people from other religions. However, she has come to the conclusion that she should be baptized and make a statement about her faith. Pastor Pravadas and the elders of the church must consider if this is a good route to take. They want to honor the Lord and his command for baptism, but Rukmini's conversion could prove to be dangerous to the Christians and give the church a bad reputation for breaking cultural norms. The pastor and elders must decide which is the best choice to make. So the main characters would be Rukmini. I said she was brave enough to break the traditions of her family and convert to Christianity, and now she wishes to take even a further step to be baptized. Unfortunately, this baptism could have negative consequences for more than just her. And then Pastor Pravadas is the pastor who wants to do right by the Lord and respect his command for baptism. However, he must consider that this specific baptism could put his whole congregation and ministry at risk. And the case study did mention also that they didn't necessarily have a problem baptizing Hindus who had converted, but this is the first time they've had a high caste Hindu convert, and that's why it could be such a big deal. Whereas people of lower caste, it wouldn't make such a drastic statement as this one. So that's why it's like this specific baptism can be controversial. So I feel like there's only two alternatives for this one. Either she does get baptized or she doesn't. And if Rukmini does get baptized, she will be ostracized from her family and her caste. However, she seems to understand these consequences and she's willing to deal with them. She can rely on her church family and Christian friends when other relationships suffer. However, the church may be condemned by the locals and their testimony harmed. Her Christian friends from college also may get involved in legal trouble for their contribution to her conversion. And then Rukmini does not get baptized, and then she can remain in her caste, and her family may not completely cut ties with her, though there still may be some separation if she's claiming to be Christian. And then she has a better chance of finding a husband and success in life. And the Christians that were involved in her life in college will not experience any consequences. Also, Rukmini's salvation is not dependent on her baptism, even if she chooses to forego this one act of obedience. So we know that salvation isn't based on baptism. So I think that Rukmini should go through with the baptism. While baptism is not required for salvation, it is a command given from God, and we see that in the Great Commission and other passages. There are many biblical examples of Christian suffering in order to obey God's command, and so I'm thinking of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Daniel 3, and I think of Mary in Luke 1 and 2 when she was pregnant with Jesus, just like her reputation could have been harmed when she was pregnant. Additionally, the New Testament tells us that the Christian life will bring suffering and that this is a blessing. And we see that in Acts 4, 12 through 13. And Rukmini and Christians around her may experience trials and suffering for this decision. However, I believe that she and those who suffer with her will be honored in heaven for her dedication to obeying God's commands.
really any like theological issues that they have to iron out first. And she's come to the understanding of like that she really wants to do this baptism, despite the consequences.
And the consequences for whom?
Well, it would be consequences for her, but you also mentioned the fact that it may have consequences for the entire ministry. So
Yeah, this is part of the, it's one thing to say, I'm willing to shoulder this. It's another thing when you know this going to hurt loved ones and others around you.
And there was, I can't remember the exact name of the group, but there is like a fundamentalist Hindu group. Sorry, I have a concussion, so I can't always think right now. Like there is like a fundamentalist like Hindu group that could really like latch on to the church, like breaking these cultural norms, and then they could really like I'm like maybe not physically, maybe physically like attack the church, you know. And one of the articles I read for this case study mentioned that like there have been churches who have been like attacked by these groups, and like they follow the whole congregation home and stuff like that, and attack their houses and stuff too. So it definitely isn't a light issue.
Does everybody understand the caste system? I mean, and this is how it applies here. I don't want to take for granted that we all. Do you understand the difference between a caste system and a class system? Because there's a huge difference. What's the difference?
The caste system, it's more rigid than a class system, right? Where you're born into your caste and there's nothing you can do to get out or into it.
Right.
Well, a class system, you can change generally either by marrying someone who's a higher class than you or by earning more money. I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, you're right. Typically, the caste system is considered an irreversible lot in life. You're born into the, to the Brahmin class, which is this is the hike. Well, okay, how many castes are there? That's a trick question, but it is something we should consider in this story. I mean, basically, we can divide them up into how many castes. Maybe remember that from non-Christian religions.
4, right?
Right, 4.
And then the untouchables.
And then the untouchables are considered, they're
Outside.
right, that's why they're called the outcasts, because they're not part of a caste. So what, do you remember, Amy, or anybody in the story there, something was said about that. If this gal had been born to, somebody in the outcast, group, how would the story have been different?
The outside people wouldn't have cared.
Yeah. The outcasts were considered untouchable. In fact, sometimes you weren't even allowed to pass in their shadows. I mean, that's not everybody believes that, but it just, they even have their own neighborhoods, and so the fact that she's a high caste, probably a Brahmin high, but I've read articles that say that there are actually over 20,000 identifiable caste variations. So 4 is your basic starting point, but there are all kinds of variations. So, it's hard to say which one of those you would have been in. Yeah. What about other things in the caste? You can't, let's say if you're born in a certain caste, you can't change, but could you marry somebody in a different caste?
Yes, but I think this mentioned if I can find it, like her parent, it would have like dishonored her parents.
Yeah, legally, Amy, in India, you can marry cross caste. Josh Chatla, if you ever get a chance to talk to him, his mom and dad went through that. His mom was from a higher caste than his dad, and there were troubles for a while because of that. But their parents weren't Christians. Well, her parents weren't. I don't think at the time. I might have that wrong, but and it wasn't a huge difference. But any difference can create issues. Here's one of the things you got to remember in a case study like this. In India, legally, there is religious freedom and And there are certain things that used to pertain to the caste system that have actually been outlawed, like widow burning, things like that. But even today in India, if a woman is widowed, even though legally there's nothing they can do, they are still pretty much blackballed, ostracized, because they're considered to, there's some sort of spiritual force related to them caused their husband to die. And that's why they're widows. So everybody's afraid of them. You don't mess with them. You stay away from them. Legally, that's not possible, but it still happens. The persecution that's going on here in India is in spite, and it's still happening today. I just talked to Pastor J.D. Enosh, who lives in Bangalore area, and I think I may have told you guys that 3 pastors were attacked in their churches, and one of the pastors' wives ended up in the hospital critically injured. You say, well, how can that happen if there's religious freedom? Because the radical Hindus, will find ways, even though it's illegal. And sometimes they find ways by paying off the police, or, they're in cahoots with the police sometimes. So they get away with things that are legally not possible, but culturally still very much a problem. I think that's what's happening here. There's religious freedom in the context of this story, but there's still problems. All right, sorry, I didn't mean to. Let's go on. Keep talking about it. What are your thoughts?
Would anyone say she shouldn't be baptized, or it would be better to not be baptized?
She should probably ask people if they're okay with it.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking too. Like maybe, I think maybe that was I can't remember now.
I didn't hear what you said. You should probably ask what?
She should probably ask like her church if like everyone's in agreement for it.
Well, I think that's part of the elder meeting that they talk about in the beginning.
Some of them thought the whole church should be involved.
Yeah.
And maybe that should be because she is in a higher caste. There are some implications to her wanting to change over to this, and it's something that the church should be somewhat involved in, because not only they just choose to help her with this choice, so they are going to have to be behind her in it.
Mm-hmm.
And if the whole church is not behind her in it, then it's going to make it a lot harder if they do make that decision.
Right. Yeah. I feel like talking to her college friends also, because I don't think they technically converted her, because the story also mentioned that they were intentional to like just be a Christian presence rather than like outright witnessing to her.
Mm-hmm.
However, like it could still, like they could still receive some backlash from it.
It's just a kind of a hard issue because it's like baptism is such a personal choice.
Mm-hmm.
But like in an area like that where everything is like based on like community and like family decisions, stuff like that, it's a little harder to just say like, well, I'm gonna get baptized, because then it's like, it's a little selfish.
Here in our country, you can turn 18, ladies, and leave home and be on your own, make your own decisions. In the Indian culture, until you are married, you are still under your father's authority. I don't care if you're 20 or 50. So it's a very, very different understanding of the relationship.
Would somebody from like that kind of type of culture, would they respond differently to a question like this or to a problem like this?
You mean would they come up with a different alternative than?
Yeah, because like I know that we're all sitting here as Americans being like, yeah, she totally get baptized, but like I wonder if like an Indian Christian would be a little more hesitant to give a yes to that.
What do you guys think?
I would say that they might be knowing how their society around them works.
Definitely culture plays an impact in the way we see things, but at the same time, someone who's truly seeking to follow God should have a desire to be baptized and should have a desire for those around them to be baptized, even with the consequences of their actions. Because baptism is a declaration of their salvation. The very image of what it is controversial because the Christian life is controversial. So I think that yeah, there might be some hesitation, might be more hesitation than we who have a very or rather cozy American life. Who are like, yeah, of course you get baptized. But someone who actually knows those consequences firsthand might be more hesitant, but ultimately they should be putting their trust in God and recognizing that He commanded this and that their very Christian life and having a public Christian life will not be easy.
Can you guys think of any example in the Bible where cultural questions modified a person's obedience to baptism? Legitimized a change in a person's attitude toward baptism.
Specifically baptism.
Mhm.
All I can think of is they were saved and then they were baptized. And that's what most of the
Mhm.
The
Bible
Ethi-
passages.
the Ethiopian eunuch.
He was still baptized.
Yeah, but I'm maybe not understanding the question.
The question is there any wiggle room in the New Testament for cultural reasons, or for any reason for that matter, that legitimizes a person not being baptized or waiting, to be baptized? Is there any way to wiggle out of this culturally? I don't think you're going to find any. Now, you guys understand that sometimes we put off baptism for a little while because we want to make sure a person understands it. It's implicit in the New Testament that if you don't understand what you're doing, you don't do it. When it says, repent and be baptized, they were baptized that day, 3,000 souls. You have to understand that those 3,000 people understood what baptism meant.
I think that I'm not an expert on Jewish culture, but I think that would have been more like what they're doing in this Indian culture, where baptism wasn't a part of the culture. It was this radical thing that they were doing,
Mhm.
where they were making this statement that I am now a Christian,
Mhm.
and they will face consequences for their actions. So it's not something they could do lightheartedly anyway.
Right.
At least that's the way I understand it.
Do we have any? I don't remember anything in the story that gives us an idea of how long she's been saved. She was saved in college
Yeah,
as a result, but it doesn't say how long it's been, right? It just says sometimes
yeah, just says for a while she remained a secret believer.
Yeah, was it a few months, few years? But now she's coming to a place where she's really seeing that she needs to be baptized.
Mhm.
Do you think there's any advantage in terms of her family or, the testimony around her of waiting at this point? Do you see the potential of any change?
I don't know. I'm sorry, can you ask your question one more time?
Yeah. Can you see any advantage? And I'm speaking practically here, not theologically. Can you see any advantage in terms of her testimony to her family, her chance to talk to the family members and explain, to try and ameliorate the situation a little bit,
Maybe if she did talk to them and and again, I don't know, because I know here in America we have kind of like a lower power gap between us and our parents. So I don't know how that is necessarily in India, but maybe if she were able to talk to them and kind of explain her thought process and at least kind of like, get their feet wet into what she's doing, maybe they might handle the news better rather than remaining a secret believer and then just saying oh, I'm going to get baptized because I've been a Christian for a while. I wonder if she could at least, if it might come across easier if she kind of talked to them a little bit about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if that would give them opportunity to stop the baptism or something like that.
And a deeper question is, does the New Testament give us the liberty to do that? Even if we see the potential, or maybe, waiting for a while, maybe there's an opportunity, some potential there for the family to change their minds. Does the Bible give us that right, that leeway?
I mean, literally with the Ethiopian eunuch, it was like as soon as he had like understood, they just stopped by and had him baptized immediately. So there's not really like a huge preparation process before that after they fully understand. So I just wonder, like, because she's like one of the first high caste like Indians to be converted in the area or just in the country.
It does say that there are some high castes who remain secret believers. So, like other caste people, some of whom never take baptism because it would mean total ostracism. So there are some secret believers, but in this church, vast majority of Christians have come from the untouchable portion of society.
Like, I just wonder how her family is gonna take it when she says that she's gonna associate in like fellowship and worship with a level of the caste system that is supposedly just the most egregious. I mean, she might even like get married to one of the lower caste Indians, one of the untouchables, even.
Should that be a game changer?
No, but it's definitely going to make it a little harder for her to reconcile with her parents.
And this is not just a case in Hinduism. Catholics, I'm not going to for time, but I could give you examples of people in Brazil that did everything we expect a new believer to do until it came time to be baptized. Then they're gone. I think one of the reasons for the New Testament command to baptize is because baptism is a very public and very specific statement about who I am and who I belong to now. People get that.
And to kind of have this fleeting thought as I was reading this, I was like, well, maybe they can just like do it and not tell anybody, but that's the exact opposite of baptism, and that's not the purpose of it.
Were you all baptized as children? Anybody baptized an adult?
I was 17.
You're 17.
I got saved when I was 17 too. So.
But were your parents believers?
I don't know. I don't know.
Was there any reaction? I mean, you were saved at 17, you said, and then baptized pretty much.
Yeah.
But no reaction from family.
My parents like didn't think I needed it, but they weren't opposed to it.
Okay.
I got baptized at 17 also, but I had some family that were, I have some family that is more Lutheran and everything else, and they're just like, they really wanted to know why I did this so much later, because when I was younger, they were like, well, you got like they do like the sprinkle baptism water, and I'm like, this is different, and trying to explain that was a little bit different, so they were kind of confused, but they weren't opposed. So.
What else?
I think the impact of baptism has kind of been minimized here in America because we are a relatively Christian culture, and so we don't understand exactly, like we understand we are declaring that we are Christians if we have a proper understanding of what baptism is, but we don't understand like the impact that other people face when they make this public declaration, and even like the thought, oh, maybe they could just get baptized secretly. Like you said, that's not really the point of baptism. It's this public declaration, and the Bible never promises that the Christian life will be easy. And yeah.
Let me ask you, let's suppose that she gets baptized and that some of the church members react because of problems that it's introducing into their lives. What becomes the issue now?
I think that's more of a them problem than a her problem.
Why?
Because they're acting selfishly and they're not wanting her to make this public declaration. They're like, it's your fault that these problems are coming on us, not we are Christians, and they want their easy life. They want this kind of under the radar life that they've been living. But the Bible promises that we will face persecution.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that we can expect that, or I don't think we can make decisions that to purposely avoid persecution, especially when it's something that the Bible has commanded us to do.
Right. So who does the onus of responsibility actually fall on if that scenario is played out?
The persecution or
Yeah, if assuming she gets baptized and it causes some waves, persecution, whatever, hassle, harassment, who bears the onus of responsibility if the church members react to that negatively?
the church members themselves, the ones who are
In part,
reacting negatively.
yes. But is that a reflection of a deeper problem?
Yes, in their own hearts.
Yeah, it could, right, but it could also be a reflection of a fallacy in the teaching of the Word of God. In other words, if the pastor, the leadership has been teaching their people all along the way, the position that I think all of us here in this room hold, we understand that when we make a decision to follow Christ, there's the potential of a price to be paid. And I'm not saying that if you're faithful teaching that nobody's ever going to react negatively. But if there is a significant reaction among the church members, it may be indicative of a flaw in the teaching of God's word, the preparation of those people for what may come. Because you can't start a church in a culture like this without facing that fact, front and center. If you don't, you're doing your people a disservice, and it could result in a reaction, which is not stated in the story. I'm just saying if that were to be the outcome. The pastor has a great responsibility to prepare his people for something like this. If he hasn't done that, he may end up being a little bit, I'm not sure because this could reveal something about my lack of teaching. You don't want that to happen. Good. What else do you think?
I think the church would definitely have to be behind it because, I don't know how they would view membership where they're at, but at my church, the congregation basically votes if someone becomes a member of the church, and then they get baptized at the church to kind of be a part of that membership process.
Mm-hmm.
If they just got saved or if they've been saved and they haven't been baptized yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's if all the members of the church are saying yeah, this person should be in our church and be a member of our church, fellowship with us, then I feel like it'd be very hypocritical to then say, well, they can't get baptized. Because it's if you're accepting someone in your church like that to be a member with you,
Mm-hmm.
you have common beliefs, you're covenanted together. It's you're not really showing that, or you're not really you're kind of breaking that
Mm-hmm.
by not letting them have that baptism.
Mm-hmm. Good. There are different views on how baptism relates to church membership. There are some who would say that baptism should automatically imply church membership. That's my position. I think the New Testament makes that pretty clear. They were baptized in the same day they were added to them. Added to what? Well, there is a membership. There's already a group that's identified there. And, yeah.
What about the day of Pentecost? There were a bunch of people who were traveled to Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
They got saved and they were baptized. Would they have been a part of the Jerusalem church, or?
That's a really good question, Liz. There wasn't any Jerusalem church to be a part of, and they're going to be leaving, and some of them in a matter of days to go back home. So, in those early days when everything's embryonic, in the church, certain things aren't functioning normatively as they would later on when the church becomes more developed. So I think it's probably safest to say that they went back and started, local bodies. And even then, they didn't have the two offices established at the very beginning and all that. So they were just meeting together as believers. they probably view themselves much like the disciples of Jesus. The concept of a church structure would take some time to develop. And I think in actually see it developing in Jerusalem. It becomes a big and pretty well organized church, and that becomes a model for others who are starting churches in other places. Yeah. What about the eunuch? Do you go back? If he was baptized on the road there, okay, was he baptized into the membership of the church where Philip came out of? Or he was in Samaria? So those are things I think that we overthink in those early days. He's going to go back, and he's probably going to find a group back there to be a part of, or and there's a church will be established eventually back there. But at the very beginning, there are lots of little pieces that aren't quite in place yet. I think we just have to understand that. But we can't, for that reason, go back and use those as proof text to do what we want to do today. We have to understand that the church did develop. So the way we do church today has to be based on the concept of a maturity and a developing, a structuring of the church as it happened throughout the first century. That makes sense? Yeah. What else? Well, what do you think? You haven't said anything yet. Any comments?
I'm in full agreement if that's what you're wanting, but yeah, I think she.
No, I want you to say something that's totally radical, man.
I mean, I don't know what I could say that's been covered already. Yes, I do think she should go through with the baptism, and I liked what you had to say about how the Bible says we're going to be going through. We will be persecuted and such, and I think when the decision is made about her getting baptized or not, there's not going to be a crowd in the story or a party per se that there's not going to be full there's not going to be not everybody's going to have the right attitude about it.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be one party that's whether it's her Hindu background or the church that is, and that's the persecution that we talk about that the Bible speaks of. But I still think that she should go through with it though, and I think that's one of the big main factors of it.
Putting it off is only putting off the inevitable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we're all in agreement then that she's just going to have to do it. And it's unfortunate if her decision to go ahead causes a problem within the body of believers. It shows a weakness somewhere, either in their lives personally or in the teaching ministry of the church. That's why if you guys are going to be leaders, man, it's so important that these things like this be dealt with so that when something like this happens, church is ready. We've talked about this. We know what the Bible says about it. Yeah. Yeah. That issue of getting married, that's a big deal because, even today, most marriages in India are still arranged, not all of them. But they're still by and large arranged marriages. And if you are out of sorts with your family who arranges, your parents, it can be devastating for a young lady. Big deal.
If her parents did arrange a marriage, with maybe a Hindu or something like that, would she be able to refuse it all?
She would be able to, yes, but she would have to be prepared to suffer the ostracism that comes with it. In some cases, that can involve beatings. Other cases, just kick them out of the house. There can be any number of things happen. Yeah, it's a very serious thing. Mm-hmm. And that's where the church should serve as a refuge for somebody like that, rather than a place where she's guaranteed opposition from without. If she gets opposition from within as well, poor thing, you know what I'm saying? That should not happen. That's why I keep coming back to the necessity of teaching your people what the Word of God says so you're ready when something like this happens. The church has to be a refuge for her. She's going to need it. it may become her only family. She may completely lose everything that's biological family.
Would that be more difficult for someone from a collectivistic culture? Because I think here we have a very individualistic culture. Family is kind of minimized, and so it's hard for us to imagine what it would be like to be ostracized from a family in a collectivistic culture. So would that be like very, very difficult?
What's the other thing about a collectivistic culture that would be a big factor if she were kicked out? What's the relationship between parents, elders and young people? What's the big issue there in those kind of cultures? When we talk about 3D gospel, mention this.
I was gonna say, you have to respect your elders.
Right, but yeah, and what's the issue there? Remember in the 3D cultures, which one of those 3D cultures comes into play here?
Shame, honor.
Honor, shame, exactly. India is very much an honor, shame culture. So not only does she have to deal with being cut off her family, but that results in shame. She is now, and not only that, but conversely, she is also bringing shame upon her parents. She realizes that that's an inevitable thing, but she still has to bear that. She has caused her father shame, societally, not biblically. She has no guilt biblically, but societally, culturally, she's brought shame on her family and her community. She has to bear that. So now she's not only have to deal with the relationship with members in the church who may get upset, but what about that? Yeah, so it's huge, huge. Hear how many times parents say, hey, just do whatever you want to do. I don't care. You're on your own now. You're 18. You get your own job. You decide what you're going to do with your life. Not Christian parents, but even Christian parents will often say things like that. I mean, I've done that with my kids. Say, look, I'm not going to try and tell you where to go to college, what to do. That's my take on it. But you feel where you feel the Lord is leading you, but not in this culture. Yeah. And you could talk to Josh Shallow's dad and probably get some stories about people that have gone through stuff like this. Any other comments? That's good.
We noticed that a good majority of these cases have been taking place in places like Asia and Africa. Are there any case studies take place
From the U.S.
in, like, the US?
That's a really good question. I haven't looked through each one of them in the book. I just got this book a few months ago. I was using it. It'd be interesting to kind of leaf through there and see if there's anything that happens right here in the U.S. That's a good point. Hebert's an archaeologist. So he's probably, devoted. He's dead now, but yeah. Yeah, you piqued my interest. I'm going to go look and see if I can find it there. I don't think there are any.
I never hear any case studies from the U.S. or like,
I'm guessing if there aren't any, probably the reason he didn't include them is because he figures that most of us have worked through issues pertaining to our own culture. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what if I told, that's maybe an idea for future classes. I tell my students, look, one of your case studies has to be one that's based on the American culture. Good luck finding it.
Yeah,
You have to make one up.
I just searched United, like on my computer, to see if there is anything. I don't really see anything in here yet.
Yeah. There are issues right here.
I feel like that there could be some cultural difference though, because in the South, like Southerners, they might respond to things a little bit differently than us in the North.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a huge difference, obviously, but it might be a little different.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Political ties. Can a Christian be a Democrat?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, there are issues.
Can Christians be in the military? Yikes. That's one of the opinions.
Well, good. Hey, Amy did a good job. I think you identified the issues, and I think everybody here is in agreement with your view on the subject. And don't be afraid. Sometimes, like Liz, I feel your pain when you say we Americans live a more cozy life, so it's easy for us to say, go ahead and do it. But I think at the same time, all of us would realize that she has to do that. And we don't say that because we think, what's the big deal? But we hold the scriptures and say, here's the big deal right here. And the scriptures just don't give her an alternative. They just don't. Now, if she were a minor and this was going on, there are implications there that we'd have to deal with, right? But she's not. However, in the Indian culture, she's still considered under her parents. So the idea of a minor and an adult in our country doesn't compute in the minds of people in the Indian culture. That's why even at this age, she would still be considered bringing shame on her family for doing this, to be rejecting her father's authority. Interesting.
So would it only be all right if she was married and got permission from her?
It would be less offensive to their culture, but it wouldn't be completely, it wouldn't resolve it. It would be less offensive if she was under the authority of a husband and then making that decision. They would still probably be ostracized by the family, but it doesn't have the same punch as she is a single, gal under her parents.
I think that's because, like, cause I was curious, would the same effect be if it was a son?
I think so. Maybe for different reasons. Especially if the son is the heir, the eldest. Yeah. He's expected to follow honorably in his father's footsteps or something like that. Yeah. All right. Hey, thanks. Well, I think we've milked that thing enough. Good job. So, Rachel, you're on next. On Thursday, it's number 41, Unity and Diversity in the Church. All right.
Also, number 50, when a woman should be a man, is based in the United States.
Oh,
in this
I
book.
know that one.
Oh,
It's the United
there
States.
you go. All right. That answers your question. Thank you. This is everybody? All right.
Yes.
No, yes, it is.
So that includes
Thanks, Amy. Good job.
Thank you.
Sounds like you're kind of stuffed up. You got a cold?
Just struggling all around.
You said you had a concussion?
Yeah,
Oh, you did?
yeah.
Hi.
I got into a car accident.
I heard about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming.
No, yeah. Yeah.
I hope this wasn't too stressful for
We're just surviving at this point.
you. Oh, yeah.
But thanks.
You did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ah.
Into the rain.